Well, welcome. It is lovely to be sitting in conversation with our guest contributor for our Lent devotional series. I am with Dr. Tanya Ritchies today, who is the Director of Masters of Transformational Development at Eastern College, Eastern University, and it's lovely to have you with us, Tanya. Thank you for joining.
No worries. It's great to be
Uh,
here.
where where are you located this morning?
Yes, I'm coming in from Wallamadigal land, so I'm in Sydney on the banks of the Parramatta River, so Snapper country. That's where I am today, at home.
Amazing.
Hmm.
Any fishing this week?
I'm not a fisher. I actually get really disturbed about fish getting caught. I'm like, and go live your life. But yeah, no, there are people who do, and I watch them, and I love watching them enjoy it. But for me, it's like, may the fish flourish in their location.
Yes, the ethical dilemma.
Yeah, right.
Um, well, fantastic to have you with us and taking time. It would be nice for you to share a little bit with our supporters about who you are and yeah, who we're talking to today. Who is Tanya Ritchies and what is life about for you?
Sure. I guess I wear many hats, so probably I'll forget some, but I'm partner to Tim, who is a TikTok guy who does reviews on tools, and is a very funny, creative guy. I'm mum to Iggy and Fred, so that's like my family, and then yeah, I run the Master of Transformational Development at Eastern College Australia, and so I'm an academic, so yeah, lots of things in amongst there, but yeah, that's the main headline.
What is it about academics? What is it about that world, which is a world in itself, that has really drawn you in or inspired you?
I think you get this, but it's actually a soul exercise, academics. It's kind of, if you can bring heart and head together, to me, that's really beautiful. And I think, theology, development, and anthropology have been spaces that I've been able to do that, and be able to explore our world, and also understand a little bit more about God and about what God requires of us through this process of academics. Weird, essay writing is my jam. So, yeah.
I don't think many people can say that. I, for one, am grateful to have your thoughts and your ideas and your encouragement, and yeah, for you to lend all of that expertise and that knowledge to this devotional series has been really, really helpful, and it's so nice to tap into that through people like you. And so, yeah, what a big, exciting, expanding world that you're a part of.
Yes, we definitely stay busy.
Okay, so you lead the Bible college students at Eastern in a course called the Masters of Transformational Development. Um, so if anyone's qualified to speak on transformation, it's you, maybe. Um,
I don't know that anyone's like really qualified to speak on transformation, but I do think we all take part in transformation. Um, yeah, and definitely I'm not, an expert. Um, so Eastern College Australia is, quite a unique place. It's kind of we partner with MST, which is Melbourne School of Theology, and this is more for those who are orientated into the world. So it is, I don't even know whether they would identify with Bible college students as a term. I
yeah, that
think
came out
they
of my mouth, and I thought, I wonder.
no, I mean, and I guess, yeah, they're students of the Bible for sure. But our course is really designed for those who are engaged in practice in some way, who are engaged in transforming activities. So that could be, community international development work, that could be, social work, or um, it could be community engagement pastors. There's all kinds of ways. We have nurses and dentists and all kinds of people in our course who are wanting to do theology that engages in their communities. And so, I guess what I've learned about transformation is, there is this thing within us that has an intuitive picture of how the world should be and how God created us and our world, and we can sense that distance. a lot of the time. And so, when we look around the world, I think, our world's hurting in so many ways. Like, I can think of a million places, and vignettes pop up in my mind. So I think of our students in Syria. I think of, our students in Myanmar, who, are crossing back and forth and trying to do wash projects. I think of, so many different scenarios in which like they're engaging in transformation. And it's that next step to what the world should look like. I think that's one way of saying it. And
Mm,
justice drives all of these activities, but the transformation is the outcome. It's living in that shalom, in what God
mm.
promises us, that we have that intuitive sense, when we're not in that. So, yeah, that to me is transformation.
Yeah, it's a beautiful description, and one that appears or sounds very inclusive and generous and mindful of all people in all places.
Yeah, and I think, we've wrestled with this, like, is transformation only for Christians? Like, should only Christians gain access to these benefits? Like, and we've come to the conclusion, no, like He gives, generously to all. And so like our activities and this transformation is entirely generous. And so that might mean crossing cultural divides or religious divides or ethnic divides, or in order to, participate. I think there is this sense of it is inclusive and open-handed. And yeah, that we receive it and so freely we give, that sense of like we're supposed to be conduits of this picture. Um, yeah,
Mm,
justice rolling down like a river.
yeah. So from that perspective, would you say that the Christian message or the Christian worldview equips or inspires this response of love, this response of justice, this response of showing up in possibly difficult parts of the world and being a Christ-like presence in that space? Yeah, in what ways does the course and the conversation that you're having with your students equip them to then be in those spaces and witness that message?
Yeah, I mean, our course kind of draws people who feel like they're ready to go to the next level. So, but they're already engaged. So it puts them in groups, where they can engage with each other and discuss things and sharpen each other. We have a round table. We like to say there's no kind of expert lecturer in the room. It's, figuring it out as we go. And I think in that everyone has a place and also everyone has a contribution to make. So, and we learn from each other in these really special ways. So I just I see so many places where Christians are motivated to do extraordinary things. And it could be like, just thinking, I have so many concrete examples, like whether that be like, one of our students, Rodolfo, who, he works with white women in Indonesia, and he just suddenly decided, we need to put toilets in these villages. And then, he had engagements with the villagers about, whether that was helpful or not, and grew into this beautiful kind of better engagement that motivated by Christ's love, and there's everything through trafficking activities, through, agricultural and environmental conservation. Like all of this is motivated by the same thing of just wanting to partner in God's way and with God as God is transforming the world.
Mm. Yeah, that's wonderful. And that's, I mean, I've heard you say it a couple of times now, but that idea of partnership and walking alongside others, and everybody has a place, everybody has a voice, everybody has something to contribute, is just so integral to the whole experience. The whole idea of flourishing is that open dialogue and that equal access.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, sometimes we can create these hierarchies, like we're like, I'm more righteous or I'm more something, and actually like we've learned that we can listen to Christ on the margins.
Mm,
And if we are quiet, if those of us who have privilege can silence ourselves a little and sit in that space and listen, that Jesus shows up in these moments where we, allow ourselves to hear from um, other perspectives and from these places of vulnerability, there's this beautiful witness of who Jesus is.
Mm. Do you think that contributes those hierarchies that contributes to some of the noise that 1 Corinthians 13 is talking about? Your devotion was really focused on that text, which talks about the clanging cymbals and the gongs and just the noisiness of the world that we live in, but also of religion at times. In what ways do you see that true of what you're describing?
Yeah, I think particularly for the Australian church, like we can think we're giving one message, but when you ask the ordinary Aussie on the street, like what are you hearing? At times it's not matching. And I think the writer, 1 Corinthians 13 is like so thinking musically in this sense, like, is this message coming across? No, it's a clanging gong. It's not communicating the poetry, the depth, the artistry. It's like just noise. Like, I think hierarchy can be that. It can be, a posture that we take and we won't move from, but actually, like, that's the perfect example of like even God, gave up his position in order to come and to actually give the message in a way that spoke powerfully. And that love was so tangibly felt and has been so tangibly felt throughout the ages. And so I think for us to adjust in order to communicate the message is a really important reflective art. We have to think, is this actually what's coming across in what we're saying, doing, being? And I think that's what 1 Corinthians 13 gives us is a bit of a window. Like, are you a clanging gong or are they hearing love? Like, because that's what's important. Love is really, really important.
Yeah, the essential ingredient.
Yeah, yeah,
What
exactly.
it's all about. And yeah, you described in the devotion, you called out these characteristics like patience and kindness. You called out the importance of being able to articulate what we value and what we want to become together. The intentional decision not to be triggered by things, but to be slow and allow time to help us process and gather our thoughts and then make decisions. Putting energy into finding and understanding truth. These are all great characteristics that speak to the way in which we can relate to the world and also relate to contexts that we might not understand.
Yeah, totally. And I think, like, going back to the biblical text and seeing that mirrored there is so powerful because we can value all these other things. We can value how we come across. We value, all of these things that we're immersed in this culture that, it's what it values. But I think 1 Corinthians 13 gives us a window to see like these are the things that are going to endure and are the things that are going to move us towards this love posture, this openness, and this way of being that actually communicates and that, is able to show Christ, which is ultimately our goal, right? We don't want to just be doing activities and we want to be as Christians witnessing to Christ. So I think, to have those tools as like little guardrails, to me that's really helpful. Like that, to me digging into that and really understanding that is like, okay, remember to self. Am I acting with kindness? Like, because sometimes you just you don't want to. You want to go, excuse me, these are my rights, and this is how you rip me them off of them. But like coming back and going, you know what? Okay, so let's think, like, how can we actually get to the end goal? Not, something that is immediately maybe, releases pressure, but that doesn't actually get us to where we want to be. I think that's, the beauty of 1 Corinthians 13.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty dynamic text. There's so much in there, and it's such a wonderful invitation that Paul is describing
Yeah.
that we find in Christ. You have given expression to this idea that I've heard many times, but it's important just to call this out, I think, that worship is so much more than singing. That it's
Yeah.
so much more than a few songs on a Sunday morning or the soundtrack in our car as we get from A to B. Worship's so much more than that. It is, yeah, this overflow or this expression of we're recipients of this love and this generosity, this sacrifice. And as I receive, it wells up in me and finds ways into all the areas of life, all the things, the decisions, the values, the relationships, the prayers I pray, the way that I show up at work and in my marriage or with my
Yeah.
kids. It finds its way, it permeates all things. You asked this question in the devotion, and I really wanted to kind of put it back on you and just hear your description of this answer or this question. You
Yeah.
asked the question, and you challenged all the readers to think about how can we measure our worship, not just on what we're singing about, but on what we're becoming together. I think that's so profound and worth just sitting with.
Mm.
And an invitation to think beyond the set list on a Sunday morning and our
Yeah.
favorite worship song, and to think about this vision or this huge, wide, expansive invitation of what we are becoming together. Could you talk
Yeah.
about
Totally.
what you think or what you believe we're becoming together when we worship and when we commit to lives of love?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so I don't want to get too academic, but like there's this Latin phrase that, it's hard to know who actually created it because it's so old, but it's lex credendi, lex orandi, lex credendi, lex vivendi. Um, and like I love it because it's like what we pray is what we believe is how we live. It's like an ancient idea, so it's certainly not one that I should take credit for. But and I think this is where like you see throughout the biblical text, and there's all these moments where people are trying to align all these things together and to try to reflect on that. And I think music is really important both in the biblical text and now. So it's not like I'm like anti-music and I'm a songwriter. Like that's where it comes from. So like, I feel like probably should say that. But I think, but the big question isn't like, is music important? Like, yes, it's super important to me and to like, the history of the church, but where does it take us? And is it moving us in these ways? And I think, that's really important because it is prayer. When we use it to pray, it forms us. And, it's not only our doctrine. And I think maybe we've been really concerned about our doctrine. Like, is it right? But I think, the question is really who does it move us to become? And this question is really important. But what I've learned is that, in the global south, for example, like a lot of these things are really interwoven. And so, there's ways that are probably more immediate to be able to link your head, your heart, and your hands together. And so, like I see so many examples of people who are literally doing that and who are worshiping, through their farms and giving away produce and, all of these examples of ways that this occurs. And so I think, it is a question in our urban environment, in a Western wealthy context, how are we linking these things together? And it's a practice that, I personally have been working out. So that might mean, putting aside, like, being sacrificial during, certain periods of the year and giving it away to those who most need it and realizing that we can be so self-focused in our environments, but that worship is to make us other focused. And it's about both the horizontal and the vertical. There's this communal way. And so I think that for me is really, the ways that I'm pushing myself to do this is like, to think about how can I be less self-focused and more others focused in every aspect of my life. And then so when it comes to the music, that flows into that posture as opposed to like being a moment just for me. Like, and I think there's so many times when I've maybe done that is I've come to worship like, oh God, I'm just so grateful to get this time with you. And, as a mom of toddlers, like you don't have any time. But yeah, the Bible shows us that, you know, God has such value upon little children, and this is how we're supposed to enter, the kingdom is in this posture. And so there's something we're redoing, I think, in our understanding of life. And I think it also is a redoing of our understanding of music, is making sure that when I'm participating in music, that it takes me to these places as opposed to back to myself and to my little space where I can shut out all else and focus on Jesus and me. Like, I don't think the Jesus and me picture is really what the biblical text is moving us towards. So that's my wrestling. I don't presume that's everybody's wrestling. I think we all have to kind of work through this question, because we have landed up in this place where potentially, we can be disconnected, and these parts of life are disconnected a bit more than they are in other contexts. So, yeah,
Yeah,
hope
wow.
that answers a little of that.
Well, it does. It's really helpful and a great encouragement to continue thinking about the ways in which, worship and justice intersect. Worship, our personal, private worship, and those moments that we have with God are, invitations or windows to think beyond ourselves
Yeah,
and to think about how this is actually moving me to become somebody that is more present with others
yeah.
in ways that Jesus would have been.
Yeah, and when I look at the biblical text, I see these examples of like these ways that I think the text draws these things together. So like I was just thinking about Cornelius, he's it's such a pivotal moment in the text. And like he's been devout in prayer, but also in giving and in generosity. And there's this link in there that makes this it's like if it was a movie, it pans straight onto Cornelius, and he's had this backstory, but this moment and who he's become is like worthy of attention in the biblical text. And I think that they're the heroes that I look to, like, wow, he brings these things together, and it's so pivotal that the whole story stops just to catch up and mark this guy who's been doing stuff in the background. He probably never expected that Christians would sit there with his story thinking about him for generations. um, so yeah, I think about, how can we be that picture, that's worth us, worth people stopping and seeing, and also worth living, a life worth living as well.
Okay, so Tanya, people will be engaging with this conversation and also the devotion during Lent, which is the few weeks leading up to Easter. And I wonder if you could just speak to the importance of that season and what it is opportunity to practice and reflect upon. And then also the ways in which, these ideas that we've discussed are reflected in the birth, death, and resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah, totally. So I grew up Pentecostal, so Lent for me has been something that I had the joy of learning later in life, and I'm so grateful for it, because just the richness of that tradition, and being able to understand, I guess what Lent means, and being able to walk through these seasons that are part of Christ's life is so significant. And I guess I was looking, just the scripture that really speaks to me for this Lenten season is 2 Corinthians 8:9. So Lord Jesus Christ was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, that you through his poverty might become rich. And I think, to me, that's just this picture of, God being willing to sacrifice, and to, being willing to transform, and to, change his status from God, to be willing to be this little, baby, and then to come and to die even. The death and the resurrection of Christ is just such an important symbol for us as Christians. And I've been working a lot with Coptic Orthodox people in the Middle East, and they're really symbol focused. And I think I've started to think a bit more about some of our symbols and how we can start to re-narrate what they mean. And so, like for me, the Easter egg is actually this really potent symbol. It's new life, and when you think of an egg, there's so much potential in that. And so it is a thing in and of itself, but it's got a whole nother journey ahead of it, if it transforms. And I think that's where, like, for me this Easter, I want to be leaning into understanding that the life of Christ occurs through this transformation, this willingness to change, to be identified with things that maybe are not considered beautiful by the world, but are actually really potent and transforming. That for me is what this Lent is about. Yeah, and I guess the transformational journey of love.
How great. It's so encouraging to hear, and yeah, really believing that this season for yeah, Tearfund supporters and those engaging with these devotions, and then beyond that, Christians and churches in Australia, communities of faith, would experience, yeah, what you're describing and what we see in the life of Christ. So thank you so much, Tanya, for furthering your ideas and comments and reflections, and it's been a rich encouragement to us at Tearfund Australia. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's an honor for me as well. Love what Tiffin does. Thank
See you
you.
soon.